Reunited.
Morning.
And it feels so good.
Yeah, guy. Yeah, friggin' guy. Welcome, everybody. It is Spit, the Spit Podcast. Scott Bass, David Lee Scales. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Scott. You and I always seem to have troubles with Zoom, but the wonderful thing about it is if we can't connect visually in that moment, we can text one another to verify what's going wrong. We can email one another. I was just thinking, remember the times when you used to, prior to cell phones, when you would just tell somebody, I'll meet you for dinner at wherever at 8 o'clock. And then you go there and you wait. And sometimes they wouldn't show up. Or if they were 10 minutes late, that entire 10 minutes you were wondering, maybe they wouldn't show up. And if they didn't show up, then you were concerned. You call their house phone. They don't answer the house phone. Did they get in a car accident? All of that uncertainty was so crazy.
Yeah, I do remember those times, actually. And there's something kind of charming, actually, about the concept of hey, I'll meet you there at 8, and it just happened. Like, it magically occurred. The other people showed up. There was no, hey, I'm wearing a blue baseball hat, or whatever. There was no texting to kind of, I guess it was a little, maybe, I'm asking you, is it more anxiety ridden now, or was it more anxiety ridden then?
I would say now. I hate to admit, but while technology is designed to simplify our lives or to organize it and make things more efficient, I think it can easily get out of hand and end up becoming anxiety inducing. More often than not, it does. I mean, if you can manage it for your own purposes, you could probably not feel anxious about it, but more often than not, I think it takes over and you feel anxious about it. What's funny is you've lived far longer without all of this technology than you have with, and I probably have too. But that seems like a different lifetime. Like this new norm feels like it's been here forever. It's hard for me to even hearken back to that example that I was giving you, even though that's the majority of my life,
Yeah. I mean, do you wake up and turn your phone on, or is your phone already on? Like, is the phone the first thing you grab?
Yeah, for sure. And when I grab it, there are literally minimum of 30 notifications, like dozens and dozens and dozens.
So you haven't turned off your notifications?
It's turned off for certain things.
Right.
But
all your texts are turned on.
Texts are definitely turned on. I guess I probably do need to manage it better, but I was just going to say, like, I don't actually feel anxious when I look at those notifications. Yeah. There's like a little bit of a ritual. Well, I'll do like a scroll through while the screen is closed, but you could see the notifications. I'll scroll through just to see like if there's anything important. And then I'll do a lap through email, but not respond to anything, just kind of see what's what so that I know what my day is going to kind of consist of. But I know a lot smarter and a lot happier people than me advise not doing that as your first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's important.
What's your morning ritual?
Well, sometimes, sadly, it does involve grabbing the phone. First of all, my alarm is on my phone, so I grab the phone to turn the alarm off. Then I wake up, and it's my hope that, and I would say 5 out of 7 days, I go and do some other stuff where the phone's not involved, like, quiet time, basically. And that usually lasts 10 to 20 minutes. And then the phone gets a hold of me.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of that, what's the LAIRD superfood ticker right now? Do you know? We were going to check and see how many millions LAIRD actually has.
It's a great
based
question.
On his food. I don't know if the listeners remember, but a couple of weeks ago we brought up the point that LAIRD Foods, I think it's LAIRD Foods, I don't know, some company that LAIRD's involved with regarding his coffee supplements and all of his supplements went public. It's now a publicly traded stock, and we wanted to. At the time, 2 weeks ago, LAIRD was like a multimillionaire, and we're wondering where the LAIRD stock ticker is now relative to when it went public.
So You brought this up because we were talking about grabbing for your phone. Do you check stock prices on a daily
No.
basis? Okay, good,
Uh,
good, because that's absolutely crazy making.
yeah.
Okay, so Laird currently, right now of this moment, trading at $51.45.
Wow.
The 52-week low was $31. I forget where it opened, but it was right around the
I want to say,
30.
I thought you said 20 something and it went to 40 in 1 week. Yeah.
No,
It'll show on the ticker what it opened at, I
it
think.
says that it opened at 48, but I don't think that doesn't seem like it's right. Anyways, the 51 week or 52 week low is $31. That was on September 23rd. The high has been 51.89, so it's actually sitting right around the high. But a couple of different people emailed, one of whom was he is a professor of finance at a very, very well-known school here in Southern California. And he
Why
said,
can't you mention the school's
well,
name?
I don't know if he wants to be identified. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
All
Like,
right.
I don't know.
All right.
But Laird,
USC. We're going to just say it's USC probably.
Laird's stake is roughly 13%, which makes his share in the company worth $35.3 million as of closing on Wednesday. That was Wednesday, I think 2 weeks ago when he sent this, or a week ago.
All right.
Laird is a regular foot on their financial statement. That came from somebody else because
cool.
the image is superimposed on all of the products packaging.
Yeah.
Basically, he said, here's a summary. Laird is the, quote, chief inventor of LAIRD Superfoods and currently owns 750,000 shares of LAIRD Superfoods common stock. Incidentally, that is more than the CEO, Paul Hodge, who owns about 250,000 shares. As of today, Laird's stake in the coffee creamer is worth about $30 million. He also holds options that are probably worth another 5 to 10. And then he went on to say, I bet his house in Little Doom is probably worth another 10 to 15 mil. So all in all, he is probably worth at least $50 million, not including other assets that we can't track, end quote.
And I'm not a financial expert at all, but I assume that you can't just sell off your stock. Don't you have to hold it for a year or something like that?
That I don't know.
Yeah. No. Well, anyway, we're going to continue to have the LAIRD Foods stock ticker. Hopefully every week we'll have it in our notes so we can just do a quick update on how many millions LAIRD has.
So think about, not to interrupt you, but think about that as we hear about that business plan in startups all the time, where it's just rapid growth at all costs. Profitability does not matter at all, which apparently Laird Superfoods was losing money as of going public. But grow at all costs, accrue capital every step of the way, and just keep expanding into all spaces and hiring engineers and building out the software and building out the infrastructure, only to get to the IPO. The finish line is the IPO. The finish line isn't 10 years into the company. It's not when you pass it down to your grandkids. It's not when it hits profitability. The IPO is the finish line, because you basically dupe the retail investor market into doing exactly what happened here, which is just buying shares. And then you get back all of the money that you took out as a loan, pay back all of those previous investors, and everybody gets rich. And you hope that the coffee creamer and the turmeric supplement actually sell at Costco from this point on, and that all those people you hired can turn it into a profitable business. But we see that happen all the time in startup. I don't remember seeing it happen this successfully in the surf space. You could argue that GoPro was kind of tangential to the surf space, but really that was a tech company way more than it was a surf company. But it's fascinating. I think Laird's the one who's executed this better than anybody.
Yeah, as a brand, he's pretty powerful because I imagine you can get this supplement other places for perhaps cheaper. I don't know, but
for sure, if you just looked at the ingredients that were on the package, there's a million other packages on the market that have those ingredients, I would imagine.
Maybe your friend, the business professor, will enlighten us as to when Laird's allowed to sell his stock and actually turn his paper millions into millions of shekels. That'll be interesting.
Laird's living the life.
By the way, it's Wednesday, the 14th of October, 2020. I've got a bunch of stories that I'd like you to chime in on. I don't know what you've got planned here.
I've got one follow-up message from last week. Are your stories new stories or follow-ups?
Mostly new, yeah. I mean, kind of some follow-up stuff like the Bells Beach stuff is interesting.
Okay.
It's sort of taking on a big life here.
Let me give one quick follow-up that came through on Instagram. Longtime listener said he just listened to last week's episode and he hadn't been following much of the surf media, the surf magazine endorsing a political candidate hoopla. But he said he really appreciates how how you can take people for who they are, not for who they choose to vote for. It's a lesson many listeners could benefit from. I gave you plenty of crap. This is him talking to me. I gave you plenty of crap about COVID early on. And while I'm still closer to Bass's mindset about wearing masks, I appreciate that you make a space for everyone. We can all share the stoke regardless of our positions regarding any specific issue. My only wish is that we all did more to take care of one another. And I say this without any political undertones. How crazy is it that one side of the political party is perceived as more American or more loving or loyal to the nation's founding principles than any other? When did any political party get exclusive rights to the American flag? Anyway, thanks to you and SB for the entertainment. Keep up the good work.
All right.
I thought that was good.
Yeah, good stuff. Real quick, and it's been covered heavily, and you and I spoke about it when maybe a month ago, but as everyone knows, Michael TOMSON sadly passed away from throat cancer. I don't think we touched on that last week. I think it happened right after our show or the day after.
Thursday or Friday morning. Thursday night or Friday morning.
So anyway, there's a ton of information out there about his legacy and who he was and what happened. And I don't know if we need to rehash it all other than to say that he was considered by many in the surf industry as iconic and forward-thinking and a creative mastermind regarding branding and how to take brands to new heights and frankly to new lows. It's mostly glowing and probably as it should be the first few months after somebody passes away, but I think there's a dark side here that eventually I think he would be a fascinating biopic. Like somebody should do a real in-depth book or documentary on Michael TOMSON and uncover it all.
So tangentially, Barbarian Days is being made into a Hollywood film. Oh. And as I've been thinking about that, I keep thinking of all of the better films that could be made that haven't yet been made. Yeah. Like Barbarian Days, I don't really get where the conflict is going to be, what the story arc is going to be. It's a guy, on a journey around the world, but he doesn't have any real development as a
the conflict, if I can interrupt.
Yeah.
Because you and I spoke about this. The conflict is, in my mind, it's sort of the conflict that we all go through. Like we're 20 and we say to ourselves, we're going to do this forever. This is who I am. I'm identifying as a surfer. I'm going to go on these journeys and discover waves for the rest of my life. And the conflict is real world pressure is kind of pulling on you. Like, oh, you know what? Your parents need you to go get a college degree. And the people around you, as you learn and get that college degree, are kind of doing different things. They're going into the professional space. And for me, there's the conflict with William Finnegan, is that he's a little bit embarrassed that he still wants to be that 18-year-old kid, but those around him are like going, dude, grow out of it. And he kind of, and somehow he pulls it off. You know what I mean? And along the way, he's a little bit embarrassed professionally to say that he's a surfer. Right. And I totally get that with the specularization of our culture.
And that makes for a good memoir, especially because he could write it. And if you have talent as a writer, you can add all of this interest in the places, the locations, the setting, and the characters that you meet. But that doesn't make a good movie. A good movie has a very traditional and a very predictable equation, and you just follow that equation, and it's 3 acts, and there's a certain arc to it, and in the third act this major conflict comes to a head, and then you see resolution for the final 10 or 15 minutes of the movie. And there needs to be an antagonist that you're fighting against, and it could be a concept like you're saying, but that isn't a nefarious concept. And also, he doesn't go through any character development, or he doesn't go through enough character development. So you're right, he's conflicted by those things, but Will Finnegan starts off as being a good guy who's talented and has kind of all of the options in the world. And he finishes his journey being a good guy who's talented, who still has all of his options in his world. He doesn't lose anything by going on that journey.
Well, if anything,
So,
if I can interrupt,
yeah,
he finishes, he's basically every surfer's hero. Like, everybody loves that book,
yeah.
you know? And so in that regard, he kind of finishes his journey. This thing that he was kind of embarrassed about has made him this icon.
And it's won him a Pulitzer in the end. I mean, it took 30 or 40 years for it to come to fruition or to that conclusion, but ultimately that thing that he's embarrassed by becomes his thing that he'll be known for. But juxtapose that with Michael Thompson. I mean, like, Michael, what makes a better movie? It's like no question whatsoever. The Michael Thompson thing, you go, oh, wow, there's 10 movies here. Maybe this should be a miniseries. You know, like, which one do we do a movie on? Gotcha, MCD? Like, so.
I would much rather see a Netflix 10-part documentary on Thompson. That would be sick. But let's not sell Philip Finnegan's movie short. We don't know who's producing it. We don't know what it's about.
Yeah, we do.
It could,
Stephen Gaghan he's got like a great track record.
Right.
But I don't care. Like,
we don't know yet. These are creative experts. I mean, they might surprise you. I agree with what you're saying.
I'm excited for it.
It seems rather vanilla. Like, the book was, and as you know, it's often hard to slam, you know, a brilliant book into an hour and a half, 2 hours into a movie. The ability to adapt a book into a screenplay is difficult.
I'm excited for it, and I reserve optimism, but they have an uphill battle is all that I'm suggesting. And so, but again, let's juxtapose that with,
yes,
I mean, Michael Peterson, Michael Thompson, the list kind of goes on and on and on about figures who have actually had real conflict. And I mean, these are internal, existential struggles that they've had from their youth that they're constantly coming up against. And that ends up boiling over into these creative outbursts that earn millions and millions and millions of dollars and influence culture. And then on the wayside, erode all of their personal relationships and all that. Like, that's fascinating. You know, that's way more fascinating. So maybe eventually something like that'll happen, or maybe a book has to be written about it first. But in regard to Michael Thompson and our kind of obituary, you're right. Much more positive has been said, which should happen after somebody passes away. But I think that's also partially because so much of his foibles were on the surface and well known and well discussed. So there's no sense in rehashing, and there's no version of pulling skeletons out of the closet, because those skeletons were on the front page of the OC Register as recent as 2 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're all kind of aware of the foibles. And even during all of those headlines and foibles, people still professed their love for him.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, oh, we're overlooking your addiction and your problems.
Right.
It was, despite your addiction and your problems, I still see the good in you and all of the contribution that you've made. And I want to like, I don't know, remind you of that, you know, and like celebrate it.
Yeah.
So I think that he's an interesting character in that way, that everything was on his sleeve, you know?
Yeah. I think there's a lot there. And I'm sure that, you know, let's just let this settle, and somebody will creatively will pick this up and run with it. And who knows? I mean,
did you ever have any personal interactions with him?
No, I never did. I was always a little bit intimidated by him. I never, you know, I maybe saw him once or twice at a SEMA event down in Cabo or something. was in the same sphere with him. But I don't know. I always felt like he was pulling the wool over everyone's eyes a little bit.
In
I
what
think
way?
well, I don't know. It's weird. There's part of me that's, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole right now, to be honest with you, but I just feel like I didn't really know him. And so my opinion of him is kind of BS, because it doesn't have any foundation in truth. Like everyone that I respect, it's kind of like Dylan. Like I'm not really a Dylan guy, but all the musicians that I love absolutely bow down to Dylan. And
Yeah.
so I bow down to Dylan by proxy. And in fact, I'm starting to really get into Dylan lately.
I'm huge into Dylan.
I know you are.
I never not into Dylan.
And so, and that's my own ignorance, right? And so I kind of feel that way about Michael Thompson. Like everyone I know that knew and was in Michael's zone bows down to him in many ways. And so I have to by proxy, and I didn't know him. So my opinion of him is kind of bullshit.
So I relate to some of what you were just about to say about pulling the wool, but this relates back to the LAIRD IPO as well, is that none of it makes sense. Like, I don't get how you can run successful businesses that don't make a profit and in fact lose tens of millions of dollars, right? Like on the surface, I don't get that. But then I have to realize, turns out I'm not the smartest person and that other people are smarter than I am and they have longer goals and they see where that, like, so with people, like I've had interactions with people, not Michael, but maybe somebody like Michael, where I think, God, he's pretty slick. And I like the words that are coming out of his mouth, but I don't know that I would give him money for this next venture because I don't really feel confident that he's going to follow through. He seems kind of flighty, or whatever it is. And then that person, the people that do invest in that all make tons of money. And I wish that I would have gotten in. And maybe Michael still has all those flaws that I identified, but he also had all of these great virtues that I wasn't able to identify because I was predisposed to feeling trauma based on what I was sensing or something, Yeah. So I don't know. I think that I don't know that there's very few people, let's say, who are nefarious and like all out evil and bad. Hitler's one of them, Charles Manson's one of them. There's very few people like that. And everybody else is full of gradation and facets and all this sort of stuff. And ultimately want to feel loved and supported. And so kind of like if you can take all that other stuff with a grain of salt, help them feel supported and foster their good gifts and keep your own space, of course. You don't want to ever overextend yourself or become liable for their kind of shortcomings, but you can kind of give them what they need to help them be their fullest expression if you can keep a healthy distance as well.
I do know that if they do ever create a series or whatever, bring his life to the screen in some fashion, that he has got so many gnarly stories. Like there are so many gnarly stories about Michael Thompson that are just kind of spoken hush hush at a trade show about what he did and how he did it and the parties that he had and the way that he spent lavishly. And there was a Quicksilver ad a long time ago. I think it had Kong and Rabbit on it and maybe Bruce Raymond or somebody. And it was, if you can't rock and roll, don't fucking come. That's literally what it said. And it was, I think, only in Australian magazines. I don't even think American magazines printed it. And Michael Thompson took that and was like, hey, fuck your rock and roll. I'm punk rock. And I don't care if you show up or not, because I'm here.
Yeah.
And it was really, and from that was like, he actually lived that. Like,
totally.
You get the feeling that somebody in the Quicksilver marketing department kind of came up with that. Like, hey, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But Michael Thompson's like, dudes, I'm living this. Like, this is happening. Come to my house. I'm partying right now.
He was probably for sure. And it was like 8 a.m. when he was saying that.
Exactly. So I hope that they uncover and excavate all of those, you can't uncover all of them, but he was this, Liberace-like kind of character, as far as like
great comparison,
the amount of stuff that he draped upon himself.
That's a great comparison. And as we say all this, how much more do you love Michael Thompson as a character and a figure in our space than the board member executives that you don't even know their name of, that just wear a suit and tie to work every day? You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
he's the best. Like, this is the best.
Yeah, in
And the
many
fact
ways.
that then he paddles out and just charges pipeline, and let's be honest, doesn't have as much talent as most of the other people that are sitting in that lineup. And he doesn't care. It's just like, no, I'm going to go out there and charge it because I'm nuts.
I would question that. I think he had plenty of talent and was equal to those that were in that lineup in 1975. And I think the film will prove that. Like, now, when he put a jersey on, was he as talented? Maybe not. Maybe he wasn't so inclined, you know?
Well, then let me rephrase it. Much more reckless than all of the calculated surfers in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I think who he was translated into his attack pipeline.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. I mean, it's true that. Well, anyway, let's end there and just say we can't wait to see something about Michael Thompson's life, because what I was going to say is that in many ways he kind of embodies that Dora kind of mystique, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
He was kind of this bad boy. He was kind of this just crazy. He did not everything. I think you said it really good a couple of weeks ago when you said, look, I forget exactly how you stated it. Do you remember how you were saying, look, I'm drawn to all of these things. I don't necessarily want to live my life this way, but I kind of am like stoked that there's somebody that is, even though to their downfall, they might not live long or whatever.
Well, do you, comparing him to Dora, I mean, I feel like Michael liked the limelight a lot more than Dora. Did Dora shirk the limelight?
Yeah, when I compare him to Dora, I don't mean necessarily like specifics.
No,
I mean more like he was sort of like an anti-hero. You know what I mean? Like, he kind of flipped off a lot of the he flipped off the guy that's just showing up as the CFO at Quicksilver, and he was more like, hey man, I'm doing this over here and rock and roll, punk rock. You know what I mean? So he had this anti-hero thing that was kind of similar to Dora.
I feel like Dora I'm not picking apart your metaphor. I'm just analyzing him. I feel like Dora was up to criminal activity, and he wasn't maybe not ashamed of it, but he was wise enough to not advertise it. Whereas Michael Thompson leveraged it. Like Michael Thompson was like, no, this is my brand. I'm going to put it on the front page and like lead with all of these crazy antics. Whereas Dora, rumors would get out that Dora was running some scam, and then he would disappear and like not ever address it. I feel like Michael Thompson would just go on front page and like make an ad about it and go, yeah, that's because surfing is this,
Right. Somewhere in here, when you're talking about this, Ginger Baker comes up. I'm like, somewhere Ginger Baker's tied into these two characters. He's maybe a little bit more Dora. Like, he just kind of was on the run.
Yeah.
From his issues.
Do you, by the way, just side note, do you have any idea how old he was when he started Gotcha?
I bet he was like 28. I really don't know, but
yeah, I don't know either.
My gut feeling was it was probably around 1980 or something.
Okay. All right. I can look it up.
Sean Doherty wrote a cool piece on Surfer Magazine a couple of weeks ago about the death of pro surfing in 2020. Did you read Sean's piece?
He and I talked about it, but it was before it was released, so I did not read it.
Well, a couple of things stood out. One of them was sort of a historical note that I wasn't quite sure about. And at the beginning of the piece, Sean writes, and I quote, "Ian Cairns knows pro surfing well. He invented it. In 1976, Cairns, along with Peter Townend, devised a rating system and crowned a world champion at the end of the year, which just happened to be Townend. And Cairns was in second place. So I've always thought, was of the inkling that Fred Hemmings is the one that created pro surfing. And I DM'd Ian this morning to find out, because, I mean, have you ever heard that Ian Cairns invented pro surfing in 1976?
Not pro surfing, but the world tour, the pro circuit.
Did he invent pro surfing?
Not pro
Because that's what this
surfing.
says.
Right.
That's what Sean wrote.
Not professional surfing. I
And
think,
that's what, yeah.
yeah, but do you agree that the distinction would be that he created the world tour?
I'm sure that he had a big part in it. I'm not trying to doubt what Ian did. I just found it interesting that there was no mention whatsoever.
Right, of Fred
Like,
Hemmings.
this to me seems counter to like the millions of things I read about pro surfing. When you watch Busting Down the Door, or you watch any of this, or you read about it like on maybe Matt's Encyclopedia of Surfing or whatever, I've never heard that Ian Cairns invented pro surfing. Like, to me, that sentence is like, whoa, that's what kind of, I wanted to get your opinion on that.
My opinion is, let me ask you, if you replaced pro surfing with Ian Cairns was one of the inventors of the world tour, would that ring true to you?
Yeah, I'm sure that he was. I'm sure that he had a vision for it, you know, alongside all of those guys. And maybe I'm
that narrative, I feel like doesn't go against Busting Down the Door specifically. You mentioned that. Like, I feel like that was the narrative of Busting Down the Door, or part of it. It's part of the storyline anyways, was that Cairns and those couple of people involved created the concept for the world tour and like the rating system and the stops and all that sort of stuff, which isn't the genesis of professional surfing, as you pointed out. But I think that the world tour might have been the distinction that Sean was trying to make.
Maybe. They devised a rating system and they crowned a world champion, is what it said.
Tell me more than
he devised the rating system.
Explain more, especially for listeners, about what would Fred Hemmings' role be in inventing pro surfing?
Well, again, I don't want to misstep here because I'm not like a history expert, but my general gut feeling on it, like what I've been told or what my brain tells me about this, is that, you know, Fred had the big events in Hawaii, like the Smirnoff and probably whatever. I don't even know the other, who else sponsored these things. There was probably the Duke, the Smirnoff, and maybe the Pipe Masters, right? And so you had these three events, and everybody went to Hawaii to compete in them. And then, of course, there was the Bells event, and there was probably an event in Sydney, or, you know, the 2SM, which is a radio station in Sydney, the Coca-Cola Surf About. So you had these different, and the Gunston 500 in South Africa. So you had these world events, and somebody wanted to tie them all together. And I'm sure that Ian had a part in that. I'm sure the PT, I'm sure a lot of the young pro surfers that wanted to compete on this tour were raising their hand and going, hey, why don't we do this? And I don't know who congealed the whole thing. You know, was it Fred that got on the phone and made the calls to the sponsors? And you know, again, I don't know the ins and outs of it. I just thought it was interesting that Sean wrote, Ian Cairns invented pro surfing. Like, that's a pretty heady statement without giving some, you know, credence or giving some credit, I guess I should say, to Fred Hemmings.
Yeah. It makes sense that, I mean, Hawaii being the Mecca, that it would be Australians that ended up connecting all the dots, because they had so many events going on in the country for decades, like local events that everybody would go travel from one place to another just to compete in those events, because they were few and far between. And then knowing that Hawaii is Mecca and there's these other events happening in Hawaii, it's just logical that the people over here would be like, we need to then connect all of the dots. Hawaii wouldn't be the logical one to look at Australia and be like, hey, we're going to come play in your pond. You got to come play in ours, essentially. So,
yeah, I agree. And the sporting culture of Australia, it makes sense too, that they're like, hey man, you know, like, let's do this thing that, and I know Rabbit often talks about the professional tennis tour as like a sort of a model that they looked at and went, look, these athletes travel around the world playing tennis and make money. Let's kind of, you know, cookie cutter this idea.
What was the rest of Doherty's conceit with the article?
Oh, well, that's funny. So here, let me read it to you because it's pretty fascinating real quick. This is sort of like a bit of a summary, if you will.
Yeah, please.
The WSL's canceled 2020 season has at least seen the WSL focus on core businesses and breathe some fresh life into the tour for 2021. Starting in Hawaii and finishing at a mystery location with a final day showdown looks sound and a good idea. The home run with G-Land, Jeffreys Bay, then Chopu, channels the dream tour heyday. But whether any of this gets off the ground is yet to be seen. The women's 2021 season is due to start in a couple of weeks and looks shaky. Beyond that, good luck. There are viral spot fires and raging infernos still burning. This thing isn't done by a long way, and there's what comes after that, we don't know. The realities here are epidemiological and economic, but there's an underlying social shift, David, that might have the final say. If consecutive pro tour seasons don't run, if 2020 and 2021 are scuppered, the bigger threat is a fatal disconnect with the surfing core. What if you and I, David, surfers, after 2 years without the tour, just didn't care anymore? What if it was suddenly 1970 again? The seeds of social upheaval are sown. People are in the streets already, and there are tough years ahead of us. Pro surfing has been an indulgence in a time of plenty. Where does it stand in an uncertain world? Surfing during the time of Corona has been changing in ways we don't fully appreciate even now. As Ian Cairns put it, whatever the world was in January, it isn't anymore. End of Sean Doherty's piece. It's a great piece. It's on Surfer Magazine, which still lives, by the way.
The website. So you mean surfermagazine.com?
Yes.
Or is it surfermag.com, I think?
I think it's surfer.com, actually.
Oh, is it? I bet they own all of those, actually. I always feel a need to point out when people talk about professional surfing, quote, it isn't just contest surfing. Like, there's plenty of professional surfers making a living who'd never surf a contest. You know, like there's this whole industry, and the narrow focus of writing an article saying like the death of professional surfing or whatever, and then strictly talking about contest surfing. There needs to be a distinction made, but let's go ahead and talk about contest surfing. He alluded to something that I hadn't even thought about, or I think was like welling up in my mind, but I hadn't put into words, is that all of the gluttony that we lived with pre-COVID feels distasteful post-COVID. You know, like the amount of money that we would spend dining out, let's say, or just like thinking that whatever your income is will be an endless stream forever. And let's even say an upward trajectory for a certain period of time. So I'm just going to keep spending like it's always coming. And we've all kind of learned that that isn't the case, even for the most secure. And we need to tighten our belts. And so that translates, I think, to this world tour. We harp on the idea that the world tour was bloated. Too many surfers, whatever. This solidifies that point. We simply cannot afford to send. We already know, you and I already know, we didn't need to send the judges around the world. The judges could do their job remotely in Santa Monica, and they would probably actually do it better because they weren't subject to the influence of the crowds on the beach cheering, right? So the WSL is going to, I think, figure out all of the bloat that you and I have talked about for years. And if they were to send all of the teams of people around the world to 11 stops next year with 32 or 34 surfers on the men's side, 17 on the women's side, and all of their crew, all of the hotel rooms, like that feels gross at this point. It feels too excessive. You know, like you don't need Felipe Toledo flying his entire family around the world with him to every stop and picking up the dinner tab at every like all of that just feels absurd. And by the way, it feels dangerous. You're now creating liabilities for all of these people and everybody at the hotel and all the staff and all of that. It's wrong at this point. So there's no version that looks anywhere, none of the new version looks anywhere near to what the old version does for optics alone, you know?
Is Italo Ferreira our last world champion?
I don't think so, but every champion after this certainly comes with a different caveat attached to it.
Let me ask you this. Who's a better surfer? I'm just going to say, who do you think is a better surfer? Felipe Toledo or Jay Davies?
Jay Davies.
Absolutely. By the way, I finally jumped on that movie. That thing is insane. Spirit,
Right? Yeah.
right? The edit by Jay Davies. So,
I mean, that's a compelling question that you just asked.
well, what about, okay, Italo or Jay Davies?
Italo.
Okay, I would agree, but it's pretty close, right? But you feel like Italo could do everything that Jay Davies did in that video.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Felipe would be cowering at North Point.
Exactly. Or that, and those lefts, some of those.
So that very first wave of the edit, the one that I did a terrible job describing on our last show, but that very first left where he gets barreled, like the best barrel of any of our lives,
Yeah.
wrapping cut. And as he's like turning down on the cutback, the double up starts to bubble up underneath him.
And he's at a dead stop at that point almost.
Yeah. And so he like pushes on the tail, kind of airdrops down into that. And then, yeah, straight into the bottom turn into the next tube. And then he's sitting there in the next tube and then does it again. That backside wrapping cutback that he does is no joke. It wasn't just to get like back to the bottom of the wave. It was like a gnarly, powerful hack, you know?
Yeah. And you feel like he might be like on a 6'6" or a 6'8" or something too, you know? But so
yeah,
Jay
so
Davies,
Italo,
I think is my 2020 world champion, not to take anything away from Italo. But these types of questions can be accurately answered, I think, without. Now, look, I want to see a world tour. I'm a sports fan. I want to see it, but you're right. It's going to look a lot different, and it might not even occur. The very next world tour event might not occur until September of 2021.
I think that's totally reasonable. I think that's a reasonable projection.
Yeah.
So the NBA has had success by creating a bubble where they send all of the teams. Is it Disney World?
Yeah.
They send them to Disney World so that they can control the bubble and everything that enters and exits, and the teams can play in isolation without any fans. There's a version of that we could do with the surfers where you fly them to the different venues on private jets. They quarantine at the location. They rent out whatever the accommodation is, and they all stay together and travel in that bubble. Now, the hiccup in that model is money. Like the NBA is so profitable that they can do that. The WSL loses money.
Yeah.
And the person that's funding it, I can't imagine, wants to continue funding it for the rest until we have a foreseeable, end point to this, which with COVID, everything's out the window. So in the idea of like venture capital funding the LAIRD IPO, there is a finish line there. Like for Dirk, there's no reason to keep dumping money into this thing. So it's really ominous. And your initial question of will Italo be the final world champ? I mean, look, he might be the final world champ of this iteration and this I don't know, it's not even a chapter. This is a complete volume of professional surfing that was the World Surf League. And then from the ashes, some other Ian Cairns gets together with a buddy.
You say that. That's my next question.
And they get together and they cobble together some new world tour, and everybody pays their own way, and then there's a world champ in that, and Jay Davies wins it. But
let me go there real quick if you don't mind. So let's say the WSL ends, and by the way, if it goes away as we now know it, it's not like they failed. It's like COVID happened, like at least they leave with kind of like they can leave and kind of be like, dude, we tried, but COVID kicked our ass. And everyone can kind of go, yeah, that sucks. That's a bummer. It's not like they tried without this pandemic and they lost it and they just cashed in their chips and flipped everyone off. So let's just say that the WSL goes away because it just can't sustain this thing. And we're left basically in a shambles, right? And I've been thinking, like, who's the character when you look back to 1975, you had these young surfers that were keen on making this thing happen. And you had Fred Hemmings and maybe in some way Randy Rarick as well, kind of helping to cobble it together from you had a spokesperson in Fred Hemmings who could pick up the phone and go, CEO of Smirnoff, this is Fred Hemmings. I want to talk to you about this thing. So you've got this really powerful figurehead in Fred, and you've got powerful surfers, their own egos involved too, and Ian and Rabbit and PT and some of the others, Bruce Raymond maybe. So who are these guys now? Who are the Ian Cairns? Like, to me, I think of like Jake Patterson, you know, and I know, and I'm just throwing that out there, but there's these kind of strong sporting, strong-minded guys that could be the new Ian Cairns and say, let's say in 3 years, who are the characters in your mind that, and maybe they're not even in the public realm, you know, maybe there's guys.
Sadly, the first names that come to my mind are Pat O'Connell and then maybe Ace Buchan. If you're talking about like from the world tour standpoint, like
no, I'm just saying whoever, like maybe
okay.
it's, you know, somebody we don't even, you know, but
okay.
but you know, I'm just thinking like strong, headstrong Aussie sporting guys. Like Jake Patterson to me is like the guy that go, I know how to do this. Let's
Gotcha. Like somebody who's going to start from scratch and just design
basically who's going to be able to cobble it together and go, let's do a little tour here. You know, who is that guy? Or those guys? It's more than one guy. Maybe it's Barton Lynch and Jake Patterson.
Well, Stab Magazine has done a decent job of reinventing the wheel with their Stab 100 or Surf 100 events. So my initial thought when you were asking that was whose resume actually has some world tour experience on it and all that. And ultimately the person who you're asking about should have some level of experience in that world or at least some business acumen, let's say.
Right.
Maybe the resume doesn't have world tour on it, but business acumen would go a long way.
Yeah.
And then we need a innovator, you know, like Steve Jobs was the conductor and Wozniak did all of the work, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you needed a conductor because nobody wants to buy anything from Wozniak. So I feel like Eric Logan is the CEO of the WSL, has the showmanship, but he doesn't have the street cred nor the track record to run a world tour, right? And so those are turns out highly important in the world of surfing. So, and I also don't know that he has like the leadership kind of thing that Steve Jobs had. So there could be, Stab Magazine could be the Wozniak figure in this, where they have the business acumen, they have a platform, they have some experience under their belt, and they certainly have the Rolodex. They can get everybody involved and hire the best talent in terms of putting the production together.
I've got a name for you.
And then you would give me the name of who is the Steve Jobs figure in this analogy.
I don't know if he's Steve Jobs, but I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm sure you can pick it apart, but for the sake of this conversation, how about Evan Slater?
Evan would be amazing. Evan would be maybe not Steve Jobs, but he would be the right-hand man to Steve Jobs for sure. I feel like Evan has all of the ability. He doesn't have the desire to be in the limelight,
right?
Rallying everybody up.
Yeah.
He wouldn't want to be wearing a turtleneck on stage, rallying the troops. You know what I mean?
Who's wearing the turtleneck? That's the question.
That is the question. And
I
honestly,
think Jake Patterson's a guy that could do that.
No, I feel like he's a great color commentary kind of guy, but I don't know that he's the one that you would want to put all of your trust in.
I'm just trying to throw some names at you.
I know. I like it. I appreciate it. We need somebody. Well, I mean, would Kelly's the guy. He's got a bald head. He could wear a turtleneck.
To me, Kelly's almost too close to it. It's too much the same. Like I know there's a ton of brand equity there, but to me, and I could be wrong. It's
the same. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It feels like the same old, like we almost need kind of like a fresh, fertile, like a new, like, you know what I mean? Like, I agree completely. And the other thing is he brought us the wave pool and put it on tour. So it's kind of like, that's like Steve Jobs' cell phone giving us cancer. You know what I mean? Oh my God.
Wow. Kelly gets on stage in the turtleneck and we'll be like, yeah, you brought us a lot of good, but you also brought the apocalypse with you. Like, get off the stage. Start throwing tomatoes at him.
Well, I'm sure the listeners have some ideas of who would be.
They're screaming at us right now, going, "How have you not thought of whoever the person is?"
Yeah.
But the person needs to be radical. There needs to be like a radical bent to it. And
I agree. There needs to be a bit of
innovative.
Michael Thompson, a little bit of Ian Cairns, a little bit of Michael Thompson. Somebody that's kind of headstrong and isn't going to take any bullshit. Yeah. And is going to go, look, if you want to do this, follow me. If not, get out of the way, because I'm moving through this. And you know what? We need something like that to set up a foundation for this new tour.
God, it's really killing me that we can't think of somebody right now.
Well, I've thought of some guys. I've mentioned some guys. Jake Patterson.
No, Barton, I know, but I'm
just throwing out ideas. Barton Lynch. Barton Slater. Would be. I'm just saying maybe Evan
those guys. Those guys should all be involved.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure, all of those guys would all be involved. I'm just thinking, who would be the spokesperson?
The spokesperson.
Man,
Barton might be the spokesperson. He's got the optimistic, strong.
Yeah, he's not an innovator though.
I'm going to tell him that. I'm interviewing him tomorrow, so
we need an innovator.
Okay, but I mean, wasn't Wozniak the innovator, and Jobs was the figurehead?
It's a great question. I mean, yeah. No, Wozniak was the inventor. Wozniak was certainly the inventor. So what are you interviewing Barton for?
Well, it's supposed to be for that BL 100 Grom video submission thing. But, I mean, hopefully I'm just going to brush around that and just talk to him about who he is and what he is and why he is that way. And
tell me about what is the BL Grom submission thing, BL 100.
It started I think it started in September, and it's Groms under 14 submit videos of themselves, and they get judged by Barton Lynch and by others, I believe. I need to look into it a little bit more. It's basically a video submission Grom thing that we're doing this year, because you can't, have a COVID like King of the Groms thing like they used to do, And so I think Hurley and who's behind it? I forget, one of the big brands is behind it, like maybe Boost Mobile. I think it's Boost Mobile is behind it. So it's a Grom video submission. Like, let's get the kids stoked. Let's let the kids have fun and submit the videos of themselves and watch and vote and all that.
Where will people be able to see your interview with BL?
The Boardroom Podcast.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to use that to segue into kind of a new conversation.
Yeah.
Remember, I was talking last week, I said Sierra Kerr is my Duke of the Week because of all the airs she was doing in Waco.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's with Dad right now in the Maldives. She confirms everything that I said and amplifies it, doubles down on it. Like, she posted this clip of getting barreled on this right-hander. It was so legit. She paddles into the thing. It's triple overhead for her. It's probably like an 8-foot properly barreling wave. And she paddles into it on her own strength. She's 13 years old. Just one flawless swoop off the bottom, no pumping, just like a flawless swoop off the bottom into the pocket, and just starts getting rifled, like barreled down the line in this rifling right-hander, and like weaving and pumping, and then hits like a foam ball, like negotiates it a little bit, and then eats crap and kind of goes over the front of her board and just fully gets ragdolled as you're looking into the pit. And her caption was something about to the effect of, if you made it, you weren't deep enough. And I was like, this girl, this thing was legit. It's not just her doing airs in the wave pool in Waco that are better than any air we've ever seen any female surfer do, bar none. It's her also getting shacked on 8-foot draining barrels. And she's 13. It's unbelievable. And so I had a thought about, you and I both listen to Scott Galloway's podcast.
Yeah.
I don't catch all of them, but I do like him.
It's called the Prof G Show.
And one of the things that he was saying like a month or two ago was about the youth, how important youth is to innovation. And if you really track the biggest advancements that have been made, period, whether it comes to painting, music, philosophy, like engineering, even with the tech space with Mark Zuckerberg or whatever, it's young people doing it. And yeah, of course, old people create all of the cogs in the wheel and the longevity and all of that sort of stuff. He's not discounting old people, but there's something unique about the youth. There's a spark of like high production that simply goes away when you have too much cynicism in your life or just too much responsibility or monotony or whatever. And when you're young and you don't understand consequence or risk or any of that, you just run faster for some reason and you generate more explosive. And then there's these great things that come out of it. And I couldn't help but think that with Sierra Kerr, and that's why I asked how old Michael Thompson was when he started Gotcha, was I'm seeing that in 2020 more than ever is these groundbreaking surf clips that come out are children. Cale Walsh coming out of Western Australia, you know, Jack Robinson, stuff like that, where they're just,
Jack
we've
Robinson's
always,
married. You mean
he's
10 years
23.
ago?
He's 23.
Yeah. Right.
He got married young. You know what I mean? There was this other clip, which by the way is my Duke. His name's Kobe Clements. He's a 16-year-old. Stab posted this. I don't know if you saw it.
I think I did.
The kid does a backflip. So he's on a right and he has this wedging section coming straight at him and he hits it, grabs both rails and does what's kind of like a barrel roll.
Yeah.
And there was a cross wave, like a wave actually behind the wave that he was on that he ends up landing on and then riding the move out on.
Jiba?
Could have been.
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't say, but what was interesting about it was the caption that Stab wrote was, this kid was on our Billabong trip last year. They did I think they called it Innocence, Stab Innocence. It was like Quicksilver's Young Guns, but for Billabong and partnering with Stab. So he goes, this 16-year-old kid was on our trip last year and he was doing this rotation as a pullout on every wave. So he'd finish a ride and kick out and try to do a flip when he was kicking out. And it was a novelty, you know, like nobody ever envisioned that he would land it, but he was just learning the rotation by kicking out. So in this new clip, a freak wave that has a wedge coming straight at you and then a back wave happened to come and he saw his opportunity for something that he had practiced 200 times before and he executed it flawlessly. And I just thought to myself, where his mind is at and going, my brain won't even allow me to go to. Like, forget the fact that my legs are too like brittle at this point to try to do any jumping maneuver, but my brain wouldn't allow me to go there. I would never think to kick out of a wave and try to do a flip. Like, to make fun out of the kick out is a childlike curiosity, you know?
No, it's amazing. And frankly, I think I've mentioned that like a smooth, clean kick out where I can grab my board and kind of like exit the wave with some dignity is like the highlight of my wave. Like when I think about where my ego is going, you know, the spikes in my ego as I ride the wave, you know, like I probably stumble to my feet. I might do a bottom turn and kind of get a mid face. But eventually, if I can kick out with dignity, I'm like, yeah, that was the best part of that. That looked good, you know? Dude,
I can't tell you how much I relate to that and how much it stings to admit it. And I even go a step further where, did somebody see this? Like, because
did somebody see my kick out?
And I'm finishing the wave thinking I am embarrassed and I hope nobody sees this. But then I do a good kick out that you're talking about that is like completely under control, dignified, graceful. And I go, oh, but if they saw my kick out, then they know that I just botched that wave, but I actually know what I'm doing here.
I kid you not. I don't know if I told you this, but that's my new mantra when I get in the water is surf with dignity. That's my new thing. Like, I'm like, Scott, just surf with dignity, you know? Because too many times I catch myself trying to like not be, you know, I just don't surf with dignity, you know?
Dude, me even being concerned about whether somebody saw it is undignified.
Exactly. No, Dad, you nailed it right there. That needs to be excavated. Like, what's going on there? You know, not you. I mean, me. You know. Like,
no, I know all of us though. I mean, how can you not? I mean, honestly, like,
it begs the question: if there was perfect waves and no one around, would you surf?
Absolutely, and I would have so much more fun, and I would surf better.
Dude, the COVID crowd lately there's been some crazy stuff happening in the water, man.
Like accidents?
I don't want to, I need to talk to you off the air about it, because it doesn't include me, but it's kind of like, it's almost too sensitive to discuss at this moment.
Joel Tudor. Is it Joel Tudor?
No,
Did he
no,
do
no,
something?
no. Nobody, no pros. It's just this, there's, I'm hesitant to talk about it because,
You want to enforce? You want to do some sort of a
no. Okay,
kook you, Professor Pro?
no, I just I want there to be a level of anonymity. So let me just say that I was surfing, and there was a guy who I know who paddled out and was really kind of loud and obnoxious, and not quite there. It didn't seem like he was screaming at me. He was screaming at other people. He was, you know, he and I were talking, but he was like, ugh. And at one point he was just sort of unreasonable, like beyond like it almost seemed like maybe he was on drugs, like he was on meth or something. Like he was just kind of stream of consciousness spouting out these things. And at one point he said, I think I said something like, well, what's the answer, you know? And he goes, I'm going to kill myself.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm going to do it. When I do it, I'm going big. I'm taking somebody with me.
What?
Yeah. And like everyone, this isn't just me, like everyone's in the water together hearing this, you know? And it upset me. I'm like, whoa, man. Like, and I told him, I go, hey man, right. You know what? You've got my phone number. Call me. Let's talk. Right now is not a good time. I'm surfing right now. And he goes, okay. And it upset me to the point where I'm like, I'm going in, you know? And it's kind of haunted me a little bit. Like, what should I do here? Like, what's my responsibility? Do I call him, who seems unreasonable? By the way, I guess it carried on for another hour because I got multiple calls from multiple people about this. Like in the parking lot, it carried on. And like, so is my responsibility to call him, call his parents? Do I call the authorities? And oh, by the way, I don't really even, can I just like move on with my life? Why am I involved in this? You know, like I don't, you know what I mean?
Look,
like, so anyway.
You do have a responsibility. You live in a small enough community. This is not anonymous, and you have enough information to actually, if something bad happened, you would feel guilt after the fact. So you got to call one of those people. I don't know which authorities are the right ones to get involved. I feel like calling the police, they're ill-equipped to really handle mental illness. There's got to be some other organization that would be better suited, that maybe they assess whether or not to include the police. But if you said his parents, if you know his parents, or if you know loved ones around him, those seem like the type of people that you should contact. If you're comfortable, I would contact him when he's maybe off whatever he was on at that moment, when he's more reasonable.
I'm not sure that he was on something. I don't know if he's bipolar. Maybe he needs to see a psychiatrist, or.
Well, when he's less manic than he was in that moment is when you need to have a conversation with him. I feel like this is what depending on how well you know him, the way that I would handle it is address it with him directly while he's not manic, and assess the level of threat and like talk him off the ledge. Number 2, contact his loved ones around him and get an idea. Is this like part of a larger problem, or is this an isolated experience? And if it's part of a larger problem, maybe implore them to get the right kind of mental health professionals involved, and or authorities if it's required. Dude, I listened to this podcast called Sword and Scale, and it's basically about murder. It's individual cases that he like dissects and plays 911 calls and all this sort of stuff. And I can't tell you how many times people say that. They say like that they take somebody out with them, basically. The most haunting thing is that they take somebody out with them. And the police are interrogating the person after the fact, going, if you were so bent on ending your life, why did you have to do it with somebody else? And you also failed at ending your own life. But why do you have to include an innocent bystander in it? And it's one of the great unknown things about humanity, of why people act that way. And it's tragic. But if he vocalized it, then it has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, that was the part that got me like a little bit off of my game, you know, where like I had to come back and I talked to my wife about it. And then, like I said, I received phone calls from people that were like, dude, you got to one of my friends called me and goes, you need to do something. You know, this guy, I don't really know him that well. I just know him from surfing. I don't like, but I have had some pretty deep conversations with him in the parking lot though, when he was,
lucid.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing here is I've heard countless times of people telling their testimonial or whatever, and they'll say, I was at the lowest place in my life, and I happened to be at the grocery store and a checker looked at me and complimented my necklace or asked me about my necklace, and it had a picture of my daughter in it or whatever. And that was the changing point in my life. Like this one seemingly banal interaction that I had with a benevolent stranger made all the difference in the world,
Yeah.
And so you don't know necessarily, you might have played that role for people already in the past and you wouldn't know it because they were strangers, but you don't know when somebody just needs that word of encouragement or that little bit of guidance.
Yeah.
And I mean, that guy's actually crying out.
Yeah.
And also the fact that your friends are calling you saying that you're the one makes me not feel so bad putting all of this on you. Apparently you are the one for a variety of reasons.
No, I think I got a text just now about it. Let me see. My other friend said, hey, he is in a bad way and I'm not sure what our responsibility is. Just keep talking to him and giving him good vibes. So anyway,
yeah,
that came in from another friend who I didn't even see in the water that yesterday. I just like I said, this was a parking lot event. This wasn't just me one-on-one. Like this happened in the water in a small little takeoff zone with 15 to 20 people all just going, whoa, this guy is losing it, man.
Somebody's having a breakdown. They need help. That reminds me, not to make this show so emotional, but I have a friend who has some issues that I need to call. Like I've been meaning to call him for like weeks on end, but it's a lot of work and it's a hassle and I got tons to do every single day. But, and then I'm like, well, I should just send him a text. The text will get me off the hook, But honestly, this conversation reminds me, I absolutely need to prioritize a phone call. Because especially if I haven't heard from him, then I know something's up,
And I would but I would suggest that that's really our purpose, is to be of service to our fellow man in that way, in a loving, kind, tolerant way. Is our purpose to make surf podcasts? Like, is that why we were put here? Is our purpose to rack up millions of dollars in the bank account and then pass it on to our children? Maybe that's part of it. I'm not saying it's all or nothing, but I do believe in my heart of hearts that kind of what you said, this random act of kindness that might change somebody's life for a long time for the better. These are things that, they're easy to not do. I agree with you. It's very easy to not pick up the phone. But, and I would also suggest that I bet if you do that, the rest of your day is going to have a ton of serenity in it.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, sounds like you have some heavy lifting to do, man. That's not a light workload.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, let us know how it goes on our next episode of Spit.
Oh.
All right. Well, I already gave you my Duke was Cody Clemens for the backflip pull-out 16-year-old.
What about this Bell's Maurice Cole situation where he's running for council? It's kind of been blowing up on.
Yeah. What do you got?
I read Stu Nettle wrote a little dispatch on SwellNet. Do you ever read Stu on swellnet.com? Yeah. The greatest thing that I gleaned from his thing is that they call the WSL Wazzle. I had no idea. Did you know this? Did you know this?
Yes.
I had no idea that they've in the way that only Australians can, they've taken the WSL and made the term for the WSL, their new vernacular is Wazzle.
Yeah.
And then they shorten it to Woz, W-O-Z, which I just had to mention that. That is great. And this is one of the many reasons we love Australians. The fact that throughout this article, I'm reading Woz.
It is funny. You're right. It is hilarious.
Anyway, Maurice Cole's running for council there in the Torquay region and Bell's region. And he's trying to get a complete sweep of the council, old council out, new council in with transparency, because he feels like there's some backroom shady dealings, and he might be onto something based on some Freedom of Information Act emails that he's gotten regarding WAS and some of the council people there. And anyway, I would suggest you go on to Maurice Cole's Instagram. He's got a 5-minute video basically explaining everything.
Of course there's shady backroom dealings. Welcome to politics, Maurice. This is how it works. How long until we see Maurice wearing a suit, like smoking a cigar, just being like, anyways, I've really come around to the way that the city council operates.
Not even, dude. Maurice is not going to be that guy.
He'll have his hair back tied into a bun, clean shaven.
Not even. He's just so.
I've rethought this walkway.
I just love that he's got so much passion. Like, this guy's got a lot of shit going on in his life, and we love Maurice. And he's got, he's fighting cancer, and he's got illness and health and then I mean, he's just jumping into this thing with all of his gusto, and I just want him to be careful.
Yeah, it's awesome. Speaking of which, looks like you voted last week in our American election.
Yeah, you should too. Everyone should vote,
regardless
of who you vote for. There's another thing actually. Did you hear Scott Galloway on Pivot or on the Prof G show? These two podcasts. He talked about citizenship and what it means to be a citizen, and how we're losing this concept of being a good citizen. Like, do people realize what it is to be a citizen? He did a great job of breaking it down, but do your civic duty, be a citizen, and vote one way or the other.
I did not catch that episode. I did vote, and I like the sentiment a lot. I think we've grown up because society is already kind of built out and structured. We've grown up not having any idea what it would be like to have to rebuild this thing or to live in anarchy. I'm watching this documentary on Showtime. It's called Kingdom of Silence, and it's about the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi being killed by the royal family. And Kingdom of Silence, it's on Showtime. And to see the way that country operates, I mean, it's deplorable. It's completely deplorable. Yeah. And they get into a little bit about our couple of last couple of decades of administrations and American politics kind of influence and support of various things, but ultimately the current Saudi ruler killed their biggest, most well-known journalist who had developed tons of credibility, not only in the Saudi world, but also in America and elsewhere in Western world and all that. And he was a dissenting voice, but not like radical. So he was real measured and just provided so much value for all of humanity to understand these complex issues that are involved in religion and whatever. And they killed him, walked into the embassy, never seen again. And everybody, and then people don't even address it. Like, no, it's like insane.
I know I'm so glad you brought this up. I can't wait to watch this. It's
so disturbing.
It's one of this decade's, or maybe last year, 2019.
Yeah.
It's one of the most untold stories. It's a story that's on many deep levels regarding freedom of press and a free democracy.
Well,
anyway, I'm looking forward to looking into it.
Regard to citizenship, it's like you see that on one end of the spectrum, and then you see things that have happened in America in 2020 and little breakdowns of government and this kind of dissension between this partisan politic dissension that we're talking about, where if you say I'm pro-America, that means you are this and you're voting for this person and that you're anti all these. And it's like, no, the dissension is problematic. Like, that's how you end up in the situation that Saudi is. So all these little kind of fractures that we're seeing in our current democracy are important to note and important to vote on and important to get involved in. And be a citizen. Being a citizen is the best way to put it. And part of being a citizen is voting, but also part of it is not shouting at the people who disagree with you. Another part of it is not littering. Don't throw your trash out the window. Pick up trash when you're on the beach. All of these are citizen things, you know, and being a good citizen will unite us and do well for us.
Yes.
So I like it. I like it a lot.
My Duke, I only have a Duke. I don't have a coupe, but my Duke is Vissla and their Creators and Innovators Upcycle Contest. They have the finalists. I don't know if you've seen this. They do this every year.
I've seen it every year.
And yeah, it's really cool. You can vote on it right now. I've been looking at all day yesterday. I was checking it out. And basically, public voting is open from October 12th to October 16th. So right now, the final public vote rankings will count as one of 3 votes to determine the winners. The remaining 2 judges, Surfrider CEO Chad Nelson and Vissla CEO Paul Nade. And you can scroll, the winners will be announced at a digital event on October 28th. And let me just say that I have some information on it. So participants send in their entries in the form of imagery and videos on how they built these surfboards out of waste. And they come from San Diego, Costa Rica, New Zealand, Brazil, San Francisco, Japan, Puerto Rico, Carlsbad, Portugal, Australia, and Los Angeles. Materials used include broken longboards, piles of packing material from bike boxes, shoe insoles, rope found on the beach, bent roof racks, fish box blanks, seaweed, waste wood stringers, dried sea lettuce, wood, hemp cork, EPS from an old refrigerator, plastic bottles, wax combs, succulent planters, a bag of used wine corks, cigarette butts, Corona masks, microplastics, a Trax surfing magazine, December 12th issue to be exact, 600 toilet paper rolls, and a lot of glue and patience. These are just some of the materials from some of the participants. And they're really cool, short, well done little vignettes, video vignettes on the build out of these boards from waste. So again, Vissla's Creators and Innovators Upcycle Contest surfboard manufacturing thing. It's really cool. By the way, real quick, the music in Jay Davies' Spirit is fucking really good too. Excuse my F-bomb.
Yeah, it really is. My must-see moment is Mason on his MR twin fin at some slab in Hawaii, presumably east side. Like,
it's crazy.
You watched it?
Yeah, it's unsurfable. It's just like, it's madness.
Well, I also love him riding the MR twin with a couple of little bump wings in the tail. And I love the idea, like, how incredible is it that we have guys like MR still building boards? You can just go order a custom MR. You can order a Simon Anderson, Dick Brewer, Rennie Yater. Like, it's insane.
I know.
And so I love seeing Mason ride that thing. It almost looks like a disc under his feet. Just, it's wide, short, and he surfs it beautifully. And of course the wave's crazy, but that's my must-see moment.
Cool. Well,
by the way, I tried to order a Neat Essentials wetsuit yesterday. The ultra premium 3-2 for a ridiculously fair price. I don't even want to call it discount. It's not discounted, but it's just, it feels like I'm denigrating the quality to say discount, but the suits are really, really fairly priced, and they're the highest quality suits on the market that you can get. Anyways, sad to say, it was out of stock, and I sent it says put in your email if you want to get notified when it comes back in stock. I immediately got a notification that it'll be back in stock next week. So
great.
They usually, I mean, honestly, every time I've ordered from them, it gets to me within 3 days, I'd say, maybe 2 days.
Yeah, really fast.
So fast. So the fact that they're out of stock, but I still get it next week is better than most people's general shipping policy. So neatessentials.com has been keeping us warm and in biz for the last couple of years. Shout out.
Absolutely. Get your Neat Essentials. I totally agree.
Have you tried the new ultra premium suits?
No, I need to get on it. The water's pretty warm here. I keep telling myself I'm going to order a full suit, and I keep putting it off.
That's why I was doing it as a preventative measure, because I didn't want them to be sold out. But yeah, the water's been crazy warm, actually.
I need to get on that for sure. By the way, people have been asking about the Boardroom Show. I ran into Ryan Birch in the water yesterday, and he's like, hey, what's going on with the Boardroom Show this year? So the answer is the first weekend in May of 2021, we're scheduled But I also have a backup date of September 2021 because I'm not sure large gatherings are going to be allowed until probably summertime or the end of summer, based on what I'm hearing from the scientists. So just keep that in mind.
Good to know.
Yeah. Okay, well, gosh, until next time, what music are you going to do an outro with here?
Haven't even thought about it yet, but I'm open
That
to
last
suggestion.
song was pretty good.
Well, it's hilarious, right?
Yeah, you made a good theme. You weaved it
The
together.
song was
congruent.
The title states it all. It's a great song, but the title, it's a Dave Mason song from the 70s called We Just Disagree.
Yeah.
That could be our theme song.
It kind of could be. It's kind of could be. So people didn't like the Robin Trower I did 2 episodes ago. Is that what you were telling me?
Dude, no matter what you do or I do, there's going to be people that say they don't like it. So don't even worry about what people said they don't like or do like. And I'm sure there's tons of people that like it. You read an email of somebody that said that they like it. Yeah. So stick with your heart. And I'm open to suggestions. So send me some. If you have something right now, say it.
No, I'll send you. Yeah, I'll send you an email or text or whatever.
All right.
Okay. Until next time, adios and aloha.